Good morning and welcome. I'm Bob Pace. I'm your host, and here we are talking about CPS and how to save our children, how to keep our children from CPS. And you're probably thinking, well, this is a crazy show, but CPS stands for Child Protection Services, and it's to protect our children through neglect and abuse, but also supposed to do family reunification. But I think they forgot about that one a long time ago. They're supposed to be fair to parents. But anyway, you're going to find out that Child Protection Services is not your friend. They may have different acronyms around the country, but it's the agency, the branch of social services that deals with protecting our kids. They've been around since 1853 when they started out in New York and they were taking care of the kids in camps and so forth. It's terrible because there's so many homeless children without parents and stuff, and they're being abused. And over the years, it's been going on for a long time. But one thing they seem to have the same problem is the money part. It's a money making business. It's $1 billion today, and they are making money off your kids. It's the sole purpose of why they're in existence. They're not to protect your children. I mean, there's too many crazy stories going right now. Anyway, this podcast is on twice a day, 7 days a week. And if you want to be on the podcast, you can, um, let me take this off here. You can um, email my producer, Grace, who does a lot of hard work producing these podcasts. And I want to thank her for doing her hard work. And she can be emailed at Grace at vincentwdavis.com. That's Grace at vincentdavis.com. And you just tell her I want to be on the Monday show, morning show, or evening show. I'm on at 10 o'clock in the morning Pacific Standard Time, and then again at 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time for 1 hour. And so I really welcome you all. I'm saddened by what your stories are. I've had some really heart wrenching the last couple of days of people about their kids, and it's a lot of the heart wrenching stories are foster kids that grew up in the system and now have children of their own, and then they're finding out that CPS is taking their children. And it is really, really, really sad. I also want to thank Mr. Davis, Vincent Davis, who produces this show. He's Vincent Davis and Associates law firm, and if you need help, please call him at 888-888-6582. That's Vincent W. Davis. And make sure you tell him that Bob Pace sent you and so forth. But I'd like to get into it. Natalie has to share with us. She's been on the podcast before, not live, but doing comments. I think she's writing an article that I'm very much interested about. And Natalie, what city and state are you from?
Well, I right now I live in Bozeman, Montana.
Okay.
So,
And
but
where did your allegations start at?
uh, Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay, so she went from Phoenix to Montana. Okay, from Arizona to Montana. Okay, welcome. And you can start the beginning of your allegations, or if you want to talk about your story you're writing, or anything to do with CPS.
Yes.
Welcome.
I want to appreciate appreciate you inviting me on here. Basically, the whole everything that was going on in my case was a reunification case, of course, but there's a lot of ins and outs when it comes to um, that situation. But then there's also your partner at the time. Well, my partner, unfortunately, was it was a very domestic violence thing, and so it really plays off when it comes to CPS when they took my children, where basically was him playing the good old boy type with the case managers and stuff. Um, you know, I just recently got my kids back a year ago, so with that, it was a long fight. It was 3 years, and I was told and threatened by CPS saying that I was never going to get my kids back. and that they were going to give the kids to their abusive father. And the one thing that I noticed a lot, and a lot of patterns, and a lot of people that I spoke to that dealt with CPS, a lot of case managers that they deal with really try to just give up on the situation, just give up on your kids. They really press to do that. And I did a lot of digging and all that stuff, and then I realized, and at the time I was working at a cash checking place, and a lot of people that had kids in foster care, and the foster parents would get these checks, and they were just these big checks that come in. And I noticed that it was a pattern where a lot of parents, good parents, that actually fight for their children, and the foster families are getting paid these uh, amounts of money. And then I realized it was more, and also digging a lot whenever it comes to case managers and everything, was that some case managers, and not all case managers are like this, but some case managers at most part try to convince the foster families to um, like adopt or try to keep the foster children. And unfortunately my situation, that's what they tried to do with my youngest. But you know I, of course, me being who I am and always digging and never giving up on my children, was that I found out the foster parent was a alcoholic. And they she didn't tell anybody that she had an alcohol problem or anything like that. Also, just the how they treat children in foster care is very disheartening. It's devastating. For the first year that my middle child, she was in a shelter. And just hearing the phone calls in the background of just these kids talking to their parents, and like pleading with their parents and apologizing and stuff. And that's whenever this journey start of me putting out articles and everything of about foster children and foster and families that fight for their children. There are always some bad apples in the basket, and that's it. But no one should ever judge the whole basket over a few bad apples when it comes to that. And it's really, this whole year is of me having my children back and then putting them in school. Also, you are a target when it comes to whenever you win your children back and you tell the school that they were in foster care at this time, and they start looking at you a different way.
Yeah.
It's hard for the community, that anywhere you go and you tell the people, pillars of the community, that you were involved in CPS, and they automatically have eyes on you and stuff. There's no celebration of the fact that you won your children back. There's no acknowledging that you whatever mistakes you made, if there was mistakes made on your part, that you overcame them. um, it's just really discouraging for a lot of parents that have won their children back, mostly. And i don't I don't find it acceptable for people who have reunified with their children, and the community just automatically thinks that you're a bad parent, because you're not a bad parent. Obviously, you're just you and then the children suffer. And the journey that I am going on is trying to also have the community everywhere see that parents that have won their children back, or parents that are fighting to get their children back, they shouldn't be discouraged or looked as though they are bad parents, that they should be an automatic target to CPS. That's not the way it should be. That's not how you know we are as parents is, and I feel like that as well whenever it comes to kids, that they look at the kids differently in school. My kids get treated differently a lot because we are in a, I would say, in a very upper middle class area. So they don't think that none of this would happen to them, whenever it comes to different form of income, whenever it comes to people that are in a higher income than you were or are. And I believe that children shouldn't suffer for the mistakes of the adults when it comes to CPS. And I noticed that whenever my child was in the shelter, I noticed that whenever a lot of parents and families, contact me and they talk to me about their situation and stuff, and for me and how I did it, how I got my children back was most importantly was to speak up. Don't don't let the case manager think that they have upper hand, because you make it known that you are going to get your children back. It's not if you're going to get your children back, is when you're going to get your children back, and that they will try to discourage you on and try to make you feel like that you're not ever going to get your children back, but you will get your children back. You always have to keep that in mind. And it's a very hard and struggle for families that have gone through this or are going through this. I don't feel um, that we as a community are helping enough for these kids that are lost in the system as well, that are or even aged out. The aftermath is the hardest part
Yeah.
when it comes to people even losing their children to the system, and also uh, people that have won their children to from the system. And that is the hardest part, is just the you have this dark cloud all of a sudden on you, like this, and it just never goes away. And I want to stop that and make sure that it goes away. And it shouldn't be there in the first place.
Right, right. If I may, I forgot to tell all the listeners out there that if you want to type in a comment, it's welcome. I love you, the comment. All you need to do is put your name and the city and state you're from. If you're from another country, that's okay too, because I have heard from Australia, Canada, United Kingdom, Ghana, and Mexico have all texted in comments here on the show. So all I need is the city and the country, or the city and state, and then what your question is. And I'm pretty sure that I can try to help you. Natalie probably can too. On that case there, I do want to say um, uh, that I have a rule. I have three rules, and one of the rules is that you need to get an attorney. And you're probably sitting there. That's the worst thing I can tell you guys, because attorney costs money, and I realize that most of you that listen to the show are low income, and not your fault. There could be a lot of reasons for it. I've been there. I've been there. I lost my home to CPS. I had a beautiful home. I lost everything. I lost one child to CPS. I have my other two back, but I've lost one child. And I'm still suffering 14 years later with CPS. I've been fighting them for 14 years. And so um, I did not get an attorney at first. I tried to fight. I'm very intelligent. I'm college educated, and I can write good letters. But I met with the top dog in my area in Southern California, who had a Taj Mahal of a place, and it was like the Emerald City in the Wizard of Oz. It was all green and very deco windows. A lot of expense paid on all the decorations. In fact, the director had so much gold around his neck, I thought he'd fall off on the ground. And it showed to me where their theme of trust is, and even going to the supervisors and those kind of things was a wasted time. But I finally got an attorney after a year and a half, and I was able to get my children back. And I know that I told you all with rule number one to make a list of 10 family law attorneys. Now, this is family law that we're dealing with, so you need to narrow it down. There's a lot of attorneys out there. And from that list of 10 family law attorneys, you need to find five that are doing CPS cases that you can call and interview them and determine which one will work out best for you. Right, chemistry. You need to ask the key questions. Are you a family law attorney? How long you been? And also, have you fought CPS? Have you won cases CPS? Do you have references? Those are kind of the questions you want to ask. And I have one attorney here that can go to your list of five, narrow it down to five. His name is Vincent W. Davis. He's a family law attorney, very professional, and he has fought CPS, has won cases, has gotten children back. He's also done lawsuits, civil lawsuits against CPS for violation of your constitutional or civil rights. He is uh, a very patient man, and he can help you with your case. He does cases in Southern California as well as Northern California and all the 50 states. His retainer is based on the complexity of the case, how long the case has been going on, and where it's located. And right now, he's offering a consultation for 30 minutes of $49.99. That's 49.99, $50 for 30 minutes. He will talk to you about the strategies of fighting CPS and getting your cases back. That's a real legitimate lawyer and can give you sound legal advice. I know that's a lot of money, $50, because it is to me, but it's something that can help you on your road to getting an attorney. Now, the public defenders are not, they are attorneys, but they're not what you need because they're friends of the court, friends of social workers. They will not defend you. They'll go the easiest way out. They're overburdened with at least 20 cases at a time, and that's way too many people to handle. And they're young, inexperienced. So, you have to stay away from them. So that's my rule number one. Now, uh, Natalie, I like to know, like you've told me now you got your kids back, but I'd like to know at the start how it started. Were you given? Did they come to your home and do you let them in? Did they see things in the home? Did they immediately take your children? What were the accusations? And then did you have a family plan? Did you have a dependency court hearing? Did you? I just kind of curious those things in your case in Arizona.
Yes, I did. So how it started, it was reported that um, I guess, whenever they were over at their father's house, he had my oldest has autism, and he doesn't know how to care for an autistic child, and he very militant, just very disciplined with um our oldest. And so it was reported that he was standing in front of my oldest was standing in front of the refrigerator for a long amount of times repeating the ABCs. And they came to my house, and they because we had 50-50 custody at the time, they CPS came to my home and
Wait, now I'm
took my
confused. He was sitting at the refrigerator. Was he in your? I mean, okay. First of all, this is your biological son, right?
Mhm.
Okay, and then were you still with your partner, or were you separated from your partner?
No, we were separated.
Okay,
We were in a
so
different
he was
home.
he was and had CPS investigated before when you were with your partner.
No.
Okay, so there's no history of CPS with you at the time he was standing in front of the refrigerator. So he was standing from the refrigerator, and then CPS came. Did they tell you? Uh, I guess they knocked at the door, right?
Yes, they knocked at the door. There was like 5 or 6 police officers
Ah, the
there, and
intimidation factor. I should tell
yes,
everybody out there that what they're doing is illegal, and they have to have a warrant first of all to come in your home, and they have to have a probable cause, and also for them to enter a home there's got to be an ongoing intimate danger, meaning that maybe there's a gun a gunshot going off, or a parent is taking a child and slamming them against the wall, there has to be some type of imminent danger before they can come in the home. That's true for CPS worker. And I go to my rule number 3 out there for all your listeners is that number 1, and it's not your fault because I did the same thing. You don't talk to social workers. You don't talk to policemen. You don't let them in your home. And what the easiest way to deal with this matter when you are approached by a whole herd of policemen and social workers is that you tell them, I'm represented by an attorney. My attorney will get back to you. And you don't answer the door anyway, because if they break down the door, then they'll be heavy for a lawsuit that will happen to them. So they won't enter it. So you don't answer the door. You don't tell them. If you do happen to talk to them outside or something like that, it's a yes no answer, and you tell them that you're attorney, and you don't have to have an attorney. They don't know you do or not. So it's just a ruse to get them away from you, to get some time so you can regroup and get an attorney and make decisions of what to do. So anyway, you let them in the home, and the policemen are very intimidated with their combat boots and their flat jacket, whatever they got. It's very intimidation policemen, and they social workers typical mo will use policemen to enforce things for them, and policemen are dumb. And I hate to say that, but there are a lot of policemen out there don't think, and uh, they shoot first. But
Yeah.
they were trying to intimidate you. Did they have a warrant when they entered your home?
No, they didn't have a warrant, nothing. They just said it was for neglect. And I
Neglect of
was,
what? Neglect of what? Of your son?
yes.
Okay,
And so
so
they
there's one
took,
child that they accused you of neglect. And did they
mhm.
take out that child that day from your home?
Yes, they took all three
Yeah,
of them
this
out
is
that
the
day.
this is the MO. This is so typical of the hundreds of cases I've talked to about families from across the country, no matter what state you're in, what county you're in, what jurisdiction. The social workers have something in common. It's like I can almost predict what they're going to do. They'll come in and immediate take the children. They did in my case, and I had neglect too, but they didn't find neglect until they were looking at my home, and there was 5 years of complaints by my family members. See, there's your lay people that make accusations, and then there's your professionals, and the lay people were family members that wanted to take our children. They had alternative motives for that. And it's sad because on a phone call, it's very easy to make a complaint against somebody. It's very easy to accuse someone wrongly. That's why I think it should be in writing and they should sign their name to it. That way, it would cut down a lot of the false allegations. The professional
Mhm,
people are a little bit better. The doctors, the lawyers, and nurses and school teachers are better at reporting, but CPS must respond within 24 hours. So they come to your door, and their whole goal was to trick you in taking your son.
mhm.
All right. So,
And they took all three of them.
oh, you mean you have other
Then
children too?
yes,
Okay, so you had
and
3 children, and did they define what neglect was? What were you neglecting?
no, they didn't define it whatsoever. They basically because me and their dad had he was oh, I did have a restraining order against him because of course of the domestic violence, but they put it under as that I had battered wife syndrome.
Oh, they're also, I got to tell everybody, social workers, even though they don't have a college degree, even though they have no classes in social work, even though they don't have a license or certificate, they supposedly are doctors now because they can tell parents if they have a mental health problem and they can prescribe drugs. See, only a doctor can do that. They are so stupid. And what I
Mhm.
know now, I would never have a problem with them again. I would never have a problem with them again because I know what to do and say, and shot him down. But they're now telling there's something wrong with you. Wow, wow.
Yeah, because of the me it was so bizarre. It was more because I was abiding by the family court when we got divorced for him to have 50-50. So it was his weekend, but they made it seem like because I have this quote unquote battered wife syndrome that I was letting like he was making me give him the children. and stuff, so they could be neglected by him. But then it gets even more bizarre because CPS end up giving him the children.
Now,
So it just
why would they give them the children if you have a restraining order against them?
that was the that's what we were fighting for whenever I got an attorney.
Wow.
And there was no answers to those questions at all. And
And
then
you couldn't afford an attorney, right?
uh at the time, yeah, I could afford I was working two jobs at the
Oh,
time.
okay. Okay.
So I was able like you did, I gave up everything to just to get my children back. And I literally gave it everything.
I did
I
the
kept
same thing. I
reporting.
sold my home to give my children back. I
Mhm,
lost my home to CPS.
yes.
Thank you, CPS, for 40 years of my hard work. I lost my home.
Hmm. And then on top of that, um, working the two jobs and then giving up everything, and then just all them just trying to like tell me that I'm not gonna give my get my children. The first two case managers did were trying to get me to give up on the case and stuff, and they were just like, "Oh, you don't need to have your kids. You're working two jobs. You're not going to be present in their lives." And I kept reporting every single case manager that I had. um Literally, I went through by the end of it, I had went through, I think, 8 or 9 case caseworkers, and that's why it took 3 years to get them back, is because I kept reporting, because first of all, they were listening to my ex-husband and saying that I did voodoo, and they searched my
Wow.
home for yeah, they searched my yeah, they searched my home for voodoo items. And my lawyer was
Yeah.
so good. She was like, "You can't do that. That's a religious thing." And she goes, on top of that, uh, their excuse was, "Well, what if the kids were scared of the voodoo?" She goes, "If they wouldn't be scared, if this was if this was her religion, they would have been grown up into the
Yes.
religious thing." Well, I
Yes.
didn't, but
Yes.
I didn't never had done voodoo. And his excuse was, that my ex-husband, him saying
He's
that
trying to
was
alienate you. He's doing one thing. For all you listeners out there, there's a thing called alienation, and that's against the law. You do not alienate. And in custody battles and the divorce case where it is, there's a lot of alienation that takes place. CPS does alienation. They'll try to not communicate to kids what your parents are doing or how they're doing, or if you're going to see your parents again. They scare tactics. CPS uses scare tactics to kids, and that's wrong. They should not be scaring kids. And the problem being is that there are bad cases. Don't get me wrong. Every day I read about cases all the time, and I know there's a necessity for protection of our children from bad parents, but not all parents are bad, and not all parents, maybe they've done something that's a small hiccup that be corrected. You know, it's not the end of the world if a parent still does drugs. He's not supposed to do the drugs in front of the children, and he may have slipped or something, but he's just got to abstain from drugs, and that's something that can be fixed through drug programs and through parenting classes and things like that. So the social worker took your child and the police marched out. And what did they say when they left? What was their recourse for you?
they didn't give me any recourse. I literally just
Give you
had
no
to
paperwork for the taking the
no,
children? Nothing,
no,
no
nothing.
paperwork. You see, there's so
The
many violations that they're supposed to do. They're supposed to give you paperwork. They're supposed to identify what the neglect was. My neglect was my family belongings were stacked too high, and my furniture. Because what happened, my parents had passed away, and I was well, they were getting ready to pass away, but I'd taken their belongings to my home to sort them and send them to relatives. Unfortunately, I had lost my job, uh, and I was not working through no fault of my own, and I didn't have money for a storage area to put the stuff in storage and sort like one box at a time or something. So I brought all their belongings, and they had 4,000 square feet of belongings, and I put that in my 3,000 square foot of my house with my belongings, and it was suddenly a clutter effect. And so they say you're endangering your children. It's like they're saying the boxes can fly upstairs and attack my children in their bed, or the furniture could walk up the stairs and attack my children in bed. The children had their own rooms, very clean, and they were really doing good. But they got me for neglect, and they said it was
Mm,
intimate danger, even though the kids were at school that day. There, I don't see intimate danger at all. It was something that they had a ruse. They knew that I was down and out in my luck, and they had 5 years of complaints from family members that weren't nice. They were my wife's side of the family, and so for
mm,
that taking place, it's like I can tell about it now because I can analyze it. At the time, I didn't know it was family members making the allegation. I would never think that family members would do that. And unbeknownst, my wife's sister is a social worker, and she knew the right buttons to tell and the right buttons. And her mother said she was an awful mother. My wife of 32 years was an awful mother. And we had three grown children and three young children. My problem is I married a young wife. I'm sorry I married a young wife who's still childbearing, and we wanted to have a bigger family. So our three older children were fine. They weren't living at the home at the time, but three younger children. So because I lost my job, because I was unemployed, and because they had all these numerous complaints for 5 years, they wanted to take children to custody because they know that I didn't have money. And if you don't have money, you can't hire an attorney. And that's
yeah,
kind of like the domino effect. And that's what they do. They know your background. Before they come into your home, they probably know that you're going through domestic violence with your husband, and they knew your job situation and everything like that. But if I knew then when they were at my home, I would say, unless you have a warrant, you're not coming in my home. My attorney will talk to you. That's something that I can say now, but at the time I didn't know. And it bad on me for not knowing the laws of CPS, but they don't follow any laws. They do not follow any laws. So our rule number three is you don't let CPS workers in the home. You don't speak to them. It's yes, no answers. And you tell them I got an attorney. My attorney will get back to you. Same thing goes for policemen. I don't care how intimidating they are. If you're outside in front of your home, you can't get in there because they have to physically arrest you or take you down, and then they got to explain to the judge why they falsely arrested you or came up with something that isn't true. And there are bad police. I cannot believe the numerous of police forces in the country. Just like there's bad people in the world, there's bad policemen, and not all policemen are bad. We need police. We need social workers to help us with our social problems, but we don't need bad apples. And so
yeah.
now, did they tell you about a safety meeting?
Yes, they just told me about safety meeting.
Did they explain to you about ICWA?
No, they didn't
Okay,
explain.
that's the Indian Child Welfare Act. And I'm only
Mhm.
saying that because they're supposed to tell everybody, whether they look Indian or not Indian, do you have Indian blood? If you have Indian blood, then the ICWA Act comes into place. And that's where they try to see if you're registered by a federal recognized tribe or could be registered. And if you are, they have to turn the children over to family members of the tribe. And they, in turn, will help get your children, help straighten out the mess you're in, and they don't want money. So that's what ICWA is about. But they're supposed to say that. Did they ask you for a list of names of relatives they could stay with, their children with?
No, they didn't ask. It was so. I call
Wow.
it, it was very bland. They were very vague about everything. They didn't really. I mean, I knew that they had looked up my background of of the domestic violence, also because I was a child in foster care as well,
Oh,
and so
you were
they
in
kind of
foster
used.
care yourself. How long
Yeah,
were
and
you?
I
I
was
mean, how long were you in foster care?
uh pretty mu- pretty much till I was like, I guess, 14. My foster parents had passed away whenever I was in their care, and I kind of fell through the cracks of the system. So and I
Oh,
was just left to my own devices. Not really on my own devices. I had an older sister that was over the age of 18, and she helped. care for me and stuff, but I was still fell through the cracks of the system. And that's where um it inspired the journey of helping people now that are in this type of situation.
Well, this is really remarkable. I swear a lot of this familiarity, I think you've discussed this on the show before, or I've heard this before, Natalie. And if I'm in errors, not recognizing, I sometimes have a bad trouble with names and things like that. But I am really, uh, I remember a woman like yourself who went through foster care, who had a special need boy who needed help, and so forth. And you were so at the time that your son was standing in the refrigerator, um, what happened next?
They because I wasn't even it was at their dad's house and stuff because we had separated and everything, and so I didn't know that this was going on and
Oh,
everything,
it's
and it
it's a
was
behavior he was doing at your ex's house.
mhm. And my
Okay,
ex, not he's just not a nice person. He just he
right.
is one of those people that have a jealousy towards their son, and uh, a very bitter divorce. And then it became whenever we I was I was smart on one part when it came to CPS. I documented everything. I videotaped everything. I videotaped the case manager going through my home. One thing, what really was a big thing was that whenever they search your home, it's supposed to be for the safety of the children in the home. She went through my underwear drawer. She went through my closet, an old jersey that
Oh my
my
God.
ex had got me, uh, and I kept the jersey. It was a gift, and it was a male jersey. Um, of a team that I liked, and she said, "Oh, you have a man in the house. No, your children can't come to the home yet until we figure out if this man lives here." And I didn't have a man in my house, uh, and so I did tell her beforehand. I said, you do know, you do realize that you're being videotaped right now?" Like, because I bought cameras off of Amazon, put them in my home, recorded the whole thing, and gave them on to my attorney. Then, what really put the nail in the coffin for her was that she had literally. I remember I was sitting in my car and I was at the gas station, and she was telling me about um, something with my dog at the time, and I got rid of the dog, and she
What
said
was wrong with the
that
dog? What was wrong with the dog?
um, he was known for snapping, but it wasn't bad. So it was like, but I had to I sacrificed everything already, and I had to sacrifice my pet at the time. So I was just like,
Wow.
when I had to weigh it out, my children were more worth more than the pet, unfortunately. And then she dangled the visitation over over me, like, "Oh, if you don't do this, you're not going to see your kids." And it was all, and I made sure to tell the case manager, every case manager that I went through, that everything that I will not answer their phone call. Everything has to be done in email, text message, or through my attorney, because I'm not, I need documentation. And I said, if I do have to talk to you over the phone, it will be recorded, because I'm not going to have anyone try to misconstrue my words or add anything to any type of conversation. So everything was documented, including the conversations with my ex-husband, between me and my ex-husband, were document. She didn't want me to share those conversations with anybody. because they were so abusive, and so degrading towards me and my oldest. um I finally, because it got to the point where the foster families were just being very distant and cold towards me when it came to my children. And he was calling them every day. He was doing all these types of things for with the foster families. And for me, in my mindset, I was like, I'm going to get my children back. These people that had my children, they don't mean anything to me. They're not going to be part of my life afterwards, after this is all over with. So why do I need to build this whole relationship as though like they're part of my family? And no, I'm not going to do that. That's not what I'm going to do. Um, so I did the last thing I went to do, because they were gonna she was like determined, this caseworker was determined to give my children to their dad, who is obviously abusive. Um, I sent in I CC in everybody, the foster families, the attorneys, the district attorney, even my attorney. I CC'd in all of them and sent in every screenshot, every voice recording, everything of all his abuse throughout this um, through a whole case and everything. One was the example was on Mother's Day. He was like, "Happy getting your kids taken away day," and so that was it. I sent that all in, and it changed their whole point of view, the foster families, of who he actually really is. And so they kind of sort of distanced themselves from him. And just he didn't comply to anything after that. He didn't comply to anything that they wanted him to do. The And then, since that didn't work for him, it was in the beginning I was going against the state and my ex-husband. And then once they realized, after all those text messages, all the documentation, everything like that, it became me against the state, because he kind of just backed out. He didn't want to deal with it. He started threatening the case managers. They saw his true colors and everything. And so uh they kind of like put him out of the situation, and then it was just me against the state. And they tried to find, towards the end of me getting my children back, they tried to find ways of like prolonging the case. They would show up late, or they wouldn't show up at all for court. And they didn't have the right documentation at the time. They didn't It was just all like trying to hold on to my keeping my children away from me type situation. And that's where the judge was like, this has been going on for way too long. Also, the threats that the previous case managers have given me, like threatening me and telling me that, oh, it shouldn't have gone on this long. After a year, your kid should have been adopted out. Um, it was just a whole bunch of a nonsense of just threats and everything. And the judge finally said, you're showing up late. You're not doing what you're supposed to do as case managers. There's documentation, there's video, there's voice recordings of all of
Well,
this.
thank God you had a judge that could see the truth, because most judges that I've had experience with, or mine in my dependency court, was in bed with the social workers. They played golf together, they socialized together, and that judge background had nothing to do with family law. His background was how to repair automobiles and how to fight collision claims. That's not
Yeah,
how to take care of families, reunification families, and things like that. There's so much corruption that I've seen, I've heard, and you've told me a really remarkable road of yours, because you were first in foster care. CPS already has a record of you, so they're going to hold that against you. And you're probably the 10th woman I've talked to that's been raised in foster care that has had unfortunates with their children. I had a mother that was in foster care until she was 18, and and she was starting to have children of her own, and they took advantage of what she did in foster care. Now, a lot of times, foster care kids are in a terrible situation, so they try to resist it or fight back, or the studies have shown the best parents are the biological parents. Studies have shown that children need their biological parents. And if your parents are against each other, you need to be peaceful around the children. You need to think beyond what your feelings are about each other, which is hard, but you need to think about the children. What is best for the children? What's best for the children?
Yeah, I agree. It's a difficult situation for not just the families that are involved in CPS, but also the children that have to um, suffer from
Yeah.
the CPS as well.
Yeah. I want to thank again to Mr. Davis producing this or making possible this podcast. If you need help, please call him at 888-888-6582. That's Mr. Davis. He is a family law attorney. Um, so, uh, 4 years is what it's taken you to have now. But isn't your son now over 18 now?
No, he is now 12. He's going to be 13
Good.
this year.
Because there's another parent that has a son over 18 that they're now trying to get take him away because now they're stepping in because of his special needs.
Mhm.
Social workers, not child protection social workers, but other social workers. See, there's social workers that deal with children, and there's social workers that deal with the elderly, anybody over 65, and then there's social workers that deal with adults that maybe have a disability. And so here's this parent who was in foster care herself, who had a special needs son, and CPS finally gave the son back to her because they couldn't take care of him. But now they're intervening because he's an adult now, and they're trying to take him away. This is the most, I mean, every day I hear something new about social workers. And I
Yeah,
don't
it's
know
a
if it's just the CPS, is it the social worker? And then I ask, well, who's the watchdog? There's no watchdog over them. There's no board of directors, no supervisors. There's no accountability. They're not transparent. You know, in Georgia, there's a county where they have $389,000 that disappeared in child protection hands. Where did 389,000 go? That's not a small chunk of change. That's a lot of money that went somewhere. And the social workers right now don't know how to account for it. They said, we don't know. I mean, and this is in Georgia. See, I thought maybe it was only California or New York, the big city states,
mhm,
Illinois, Chicago, Dallas and Texas, but it isn't. I've talked to people even from the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota, the Lakota Sioux Reservation, about them trying to get their ICWA instituted so they can take care of the children, and CPS doesn't give it to them. I cannot believe the problems I'm seeing everywhere. I mean, not only does this Indian nation have to deal with issues in the 1800s, all the broken promises and having their culture and hair cut off and told only speak English, they're at poverty level, and the social workers are still taking advantage of them, and they're supposed to, you know, um, turn over the children to the tribe to take care of. So there isn't a common. The one thing I'm finding is common is money. Money
mhm.
seems to make everything go right. I guess in their cases, there's money to be made. They're going to grab it, and right now it's $1 billion business. It is $1 billion move, and we need to stop it. We need to. I mean, I can't believe the federal government hasn't recognized the fact that every so many months they run out of money and they have to somehow come up with a way to extend the treasury, but they haven't come to realize that there's money being wasted out there. I mean, there are $500 toilet seats being replaced in the military, and the military, the government is charging, or who's it? Someone's charging $500 for a toilet seat. It doesn't cost $500 for a toilet seat. There's a religious cult in Utah that gets money every month, millions of dollars, I'm saying, to refine fuel to come up with another alternative fuel service, and they haven't made one fuel. They have not made 1 gallon of fuel. They've not made one drop of fuel, but they get millions of dollars every year. And it's like there's no watchdog with the money in our treasury. I don't know. I mean, we as taxpayers, we pay that treasury. We pay that money that they're using the CPS use. It comes from us. When we make a paycheck, the first amount of money in our paycheck goes to the federal government before Social Security, before the state, before the SDI, before retirement. That's all this money goes to taxes, and then we have to prove it every year that we did not pay enough taxes. They don't care if we overpaid in taxes, because they're happy because they get the money and make interest off the money. Is what the federal government does, and it's wrong because the federal government gets this money and then they want to give money. I mean, I understand there's money to be given to aid to other countries. We're world. We help everybody, and it's because we don't want to have to fight those battles in our soil. We don't want to have to fight Russia, in the United States. We don't want to fight terrorism. There's enough terrorism that takes place in our country, and terrorism now is happening in Russia. So, I'm just really angry about this money thing. And you're telling me
Mhm.
that you worked at a cashier job and you saw check. How much were these checks that
There,
foster carers were getting?
one was one. So the girl that they were fostering, she told me, she's like, "Oh, we're officially gonna take her full on, and this is our last check," and it was $14,000.
Unbelievable. It
And
doesn't.
see,
It does not cost $14,000 to raise a child. I mean, I have heard in my case in my area they were getting $20,000 from the federal government for keeping the case open and keeping the children in
mhm.
there. So,
It is a cash cow business, and it is. I mean, like you said, from other countries and stuff like that, we're viewed by other countries as this land of opportunity. But what opportunities are we giving these families that need?
well,
You know,
it's like, well, our problem is we have a big problem, and I know it is impacting CPS, is the open border thing. At one
mhm,
time, we had administration that wanted to have uh, the typical thing. It's in the old days when you became an immigrant. Well, the first immigrant were the Native American Indians. They came across Alaska. There was no formality. They didn't have to learn a language, and so they settled in North America. Then the Vikings came, but they didn't really immigrant. And then the Europeans. He started off with the Jamestown, the Mayflower, coming people from Europe, and they came here. But there was a period of time where people came in the 1800s in a place called Ellis Island in New York,
mhm,
and they had to learn the language. They had to take classes in government. They had to learn the U.S. history, and and that's how they became a citizen of the United States. I'm not against people immigrating to the United States. We're all immigrants. Now we
mhm,
were born here. We're native. So when people say native this, native that, we're all native and we're born here. Yes, the Indians, the American Indians, were the first immigrations. But um, this thing about not having a qualification now, we have administration that stopped the wall being built, stopped um, the screening of individuals, allowing every Tom, Dick, and Harry into this country. And I hate to say it, the world has a lot of bad people. And when they
mhm.
hear the United States has an open door policy, they're going to come in. And who gets hit first? Social services. Because
Yeah,
why? Social service will give them food stamps. They'll give them free medical. They'll give them free public schooling. They give them housing, free housing. They'll start them off at a job, and in California, $16.50 an hour starting pay in California at McDonald's. And so, if you're in El Salvador or Colombia or South America or China or wherever you're from, and you hear that they're paying people in the United States $16.50 an hour, they're going to come here. They don't make that in a week. They don't make that in a
yeah,
week in other countries. So we have an influx, and we're talking millions of people. I'm not talking about one or two or 500, 1,000. We have millions of people coming across the border. It's so open, and they're like cattle. and there is a token force out there. They're trying to do their job, but we need to have closed borders. We need people to be screened. We need we need to have a system, and it's like right now we have two candidates, and I don't know who is going to be the best one to be president because it's really hard. And I don't mean to be a politician here, but we need to have something done with our borders. And one politician is leaning that way. At least that politician, makes things happen. The other politician is so wishy washy. It's like I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard not to talk about politics when they're out there,
Yeah.
but we need to have Congress change the things about CPS. We need to have a full audit and a change and accountability of CPS. There need to be a watchdog of a group of supervisors or directors or somebody that is accountable and they can be accountable. Right now, CPS thinks they have the power to be doctors. They think they have the power to go in somebody's home and steal children. They're doing child trafficking and they're legally doing it. It's illegal to child trafficking. There's also medical trafficking. I want to tell that's something new I found out that people come and they come in treatment for their child and the doctor says, no, you got to do it this way. And they say, well, I want to seek other alternative measures. Then a CPS worker at the hospital steps in and says, if you don't go along with the doctor, we're going to take your children. So
Yeah,
there's
they did do that.
medical trafficking. It's something new that, I mean, there's all kinds of abuse in the CPS system. It is broken. And I don't know if the congressmen or senators out there are listening, but it is broken. It is broken.
It's it's not a subject that a lot of people hear about. It's not it's not a subject that a lot of people want to hear about it because of the fact that on top of that they don't accommodate a lot of single parents. I'm a single parent, and they don't
Well,
put
that's the stigma
in.
because you're single and you've been in
Mhm.
foster care. You have the stigma working against you.
Yeah, it's you're just they realize that they don't put any of like the economy and how everything is and the inflation and all this stuff, how all these things that come into play, they don't put that in consideration. They don't put that you need in order to pay your bills, you gotta get a job to pay your bills, right? And they don't like how am I as a single parent is supposed to take have this pay my bills for my kid for a house for my kids to live in and stuff, but they don't want me to work because I need to be
Yes,
there for my kids. And it's
yes,
just like, are you going to take care of my kids? Their form of way of them taking care of my kids is them taking my kids away from me, and that shouldn't be the case. Like any parent, a single parent, should be able to work, care for their kids, have a place, have food on the table, and clothes on their backs to have their children, and that's where it gets to is a bigger view of that CPS doesn't put anything in consideration when it comes to single parents, when it comes to uh, a parent that is a one parent that is abusive. They don't put those in consideration whatsoever. They just think that the first thing is to do is just take the kids and hope that the parents just give up on the children so they can make their money. And that's it's a sad reality of what the system is, but the system is, I can agree, is broken. It's very flawed. It's not being looked after at all, not very well, and there needs to be steps and protocols when it comes to uh, especially when it comes to the aftermath of when parents win their children back as well. They shouldn't be as an easy target of if anything they say, if a child said something that they learned from foster care and they say it and you won your child back and they say it at the school is immediately quick to call, um, but they don't call the parent first and try to do the
yeah,
steps and things like
yeah,
that.
right. Well, Natalie, it's getting close to the end of my show. I got about a half a minute left here. I want to thank you so much for scheduling your time and to talk about your case, because it will help others. You are helping people by talking about your case. There is hope out there. You've shared some really good information about how it starts and how it happens and so forth. And I, I want to thank you for doing it. And I hope you come on my show again, because you're very patient, very understanding, and you're very informative. And you care about your children. That's what's so special. All your parents out there, I know you care about them. Don't forget them. So
Mhm.
I want to thank you again. And I want to say God bless to all my listeners out there. Do not forget to keep fighting for your children. I'm back on again tonight at 7 o'clock in the evening. I'd love to have you all on the show. All you have to do is just call in or schedule a time with my producer, and that's Grace at vincentwdavis.com.